Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're on YouTube and you see a little link down below, you can click on it. If you're you're in Zoom, you can click on the little link and you'll end up in Mukana. And that's where you can ask questions. You can talk to other folks, vote on those questions. Now, if you see these questions and you think you might be able to actually answer them, we would love to have you on the panel. All you have to do is get here a little early. 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time is when we do the mic checks. Once we're done with the mic checks, you're going to have to come another day. At 6 o'clock is when we open the doors. That is the best time to come in, check your kit, and make sure that everything's working. So just think about coming in a little early, hanging out with us. We're having coffee and tea, and picking at everybody else's kit. So that's kind of what we do from 6 to 6:40. 7 o'clock we do the kind of general Q&A. So from 7 to 8, we have any question you have around media or virtual production, just ask it in Mukana, vote on those questions, ask early, vote early. And the easiest way to do that is to write those questions down during the day and then bring them in and we'll talk about them. At 8 o'clock, we usually have something specific we want to talk about. Today, we're going to talk about audio diffusion. So, like basically it's the other instrument that we don't use very often as we build this up. And George Whittam is here. He does this all day, every day. So he's going to be here talking about it. But also we have a strong cast of audio folks for Tuesdays. So I think we're going to have a great, lively discussion about how to solve audio issues from the outside. Tomorrow we're going to talk about monitors. Richard Mueller has got a bunch of HDR monitors in Germany. He's going to show those off a little bit, and we're going to talk about how they're picking them and what they're looking for. Thursday we're going to talk about digital first events and really what you have to worry about and how to think about them and how to build them. Friday, of course, is the next AWS fantastic first part last Friday. So go back and look at it if you haven't. But that's going to be part 2 of a 4-part series there. And then, of course, we have Resolve training, education and Resolve training on Saturday. So busy week. And now it's time to get into the questions. Go ahead, Bill.
Paul Wallace starts us out this morning from Austin, Texas with, can you explain the evolution and function of the Blackmagic HyperDeck and what the Jonas Dottell Raspberry Pi version of HyperDeck will do and will not do?
It's a big question. The evolution and the function of the HyperDeck. The HyperDeck has been around for a long time. It's gone from HyperDeck to HyperDeck Mini. There's HyperDeck Pros. There's the HyperDeck Mini that Jason's showing there, and they all have their own. What's funny is that there's so many different ones, and they're all different. They really are different. Like you need them for different things. So, the HyperDeck Mini has the advantage, of course, that you're working off of SD cards, and you also get key fill out of the HyperDeck Minis, and so there's a couple little advantages to that. The larger HyperDecks will let you do analog in, which is really good if you're doing ISO records. So you can send out all your ISO audio records to them, and they run on SD cards, which is convenient as well. And then with the HyperDeck, the Pi, the playout B, of course, is replicating the playout part of the HyperDeck. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, my Google's not working too good today. What file format do you put on a HyperDeck Mini that supports the key fill out?
Apple ProRes 444. Yep. That's the. Go ahead,
look,
Nick.
my Google's working.
Nick.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you call me. There's also the larger HyperDecks that use SSDs, and I think when the HyperDecks came out, that was the big thing, was that you could record full quality from SDI directly to SSDs. And there was also there was that rack mount unit that would accept 4 SSDs, over FireWire or Thunderbolt to your computer, so that you could read out faster than real time, which, in my world, that was pretty revolutionary. Yeah. So, and the other thing about the HyperDecks that's really, really useful is that they have an Ethernet connection, and they can be controlled by standard TCP/IP commands. So it's effectively just a text command sent over internet protocol. And so anything can control them. So I use Unreal Engine to control a HyperDeck Mini. You can control multiple HyperDeck Minis really from anything, because each of them has their own unique IP address. And I know that command and control is built in to the ATEM Mini, or all the ATEM control software.
Right.
I guess So this Raspberry Pi solution that does not support record, is that correct? It's just a playback?
Yeah, it's just play out. It's play out B. Yep, it just does play
Okay.
out. It does H.264 play out. You can fire it from the ATEM Mini, so you can actually see it on the ATEM Mini and hit play from there. It doesn't yet play out when you cut to it, so it doesn't have the auto play out when you cut to it, but you can play it out from the ATEM Mini. So which is kind of cool, from the ATEM.
The other suggestion I was going to have for those that are experimenting with this is to potentially take a look at NVIDIA's Jetson Nano, which is basically a Raspberry Pi form factor, as well as it runs Ubuntu. And has all the same features, except that it also has like 128 GPU cores on it. It's designed for video encoding and video playback, and machine learning AI.
Well, maybe we can get Jonas to take a look at it. That's the Jonas building into there could be kind of slick. How much is it?
This is like $90 or something like that, right? Is it 90 or is it?
The Nano is about under $100, and then they have the Jetson, which is about a $200 to $300 version.
Yeah,
it's a little bit bigger, right?
Yeah, it's cool. It's
so
very slick.
high, and that does 6 GB.
Yeah, it's cool. Next question.
Moving on to Gordon Lake of Los Angeles. What equipment is needed for the Unreal Engine training in April?
Nick?
That you will need a computer, not a Chromebook, not a phone. I'm actually
Chromebook and phone are kind of the same, right? Just like a big phone.
right. It's Android versus iPhone, right? So ideally, a nice PC, like a gaming PC or better, with a good, ideally NVIDIA GPU. I'm going to bring in an iMac here at my office and try and build content that will work on it. So Alex and I have been scheming, and one of the things we were scheming about is simply providing video file playback of green screens so that you don't necessarily need a camera. It's really going to be dependent upon how much you want to get out of it. But, if you have a camera and you're able to get that video feed into your computer, either via USB or like a Blackmagic or Audra card, all of that kind of thing will be available to leverage. But we won't make that a requirement to get what you might want out of the progression. You could use Unreal Engine as a post-production tool where you pre-record your green screen. Go ahead, Alex.
And one of the things we were talking about is the fact that there was a question that we've had is, can you use an AWS instance as the computer that you do the training on? And the answer, I believe, is yes. Right? I mean, you could theoretically build up an AC2 instance that would be powerful enough to follow along.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are quite a few companies and individuals that are using remote computers for Unreal development. In fact, that was a component of, if anyone had happened to see, there's a fellowship that Epic had where they were inviting film and broadcast professionals to learn the tool. And some of them that were accepted into that program kind of raised their hands like, yeah, but I don't have, I have all Macs in it. And so Epic actually provided virtual machines for people to use in those cases. So it does function over a virtual machine, but you definitely would want to look into making sure that your virtual machine solution, supports Unreal Engine, has ideally a GPU component to it. But yeah, some folks have done that.
Yep, and get ahead of it. We talked about those types of computers you need a little time to make the request to actually have access to those instances. So if you decide to do it, cost you $1.50 an hour to use them, but it could be an interesting way to do it rather than investing more, at least when you're getting started. Next question.
Ken Jones of Seattle asks, has the panel formed opinions on the rebuttal article Alex wrote? My only gripe is not with content, but with form to change suit and tie to business suit, which seems less gender specific, I guess.
It's an interesting. I actually used it specifically to say not use dress. It was definitely a thought process there, because I felt like some women would find that like, hey, I can wear a suit and tie too, or I can wear a suit. So most women that I run into, at least in the corporate environment that I'm in, wear some kind of slacks and stuff like that.
Maybe
so
it's just an anti-tie thing. which I think is a
It's
large
probably good.
stress to the world.
That's a good point. I hate ties, so I don't know why. I don't know why I put it in there. I do. I wear suits very infrequently, and I wear ties even less frequently. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say that that particular component, just the analogy of how you look in Zoom being kind of like what you would wear to an interview is something that I have shared with my students, particularly, back in that March to June range. I had a whole cohort of college seniors that were graduating, and there were a lot of very quick lessons driven by what I was experiencing here in office hours during those months of, go ahead and get an LED light bulb, add a little color, make sure that you've got something that brings your camera up higher so that, you don't, if you have a window behind you, close the drapes, like make yourself look good, because that's how you're presenting yourself. You wouldn't go to an interview and just wear cut off jeans or something like that. So, a few of the students took that to heart, and so it was good.
I put in the Twitter link that goes to the Medium article, and my only request is that we can cause a little trouble by, if people go to that Twitter and either like it or retweet it. It's kind of a way to manipulate Twitter. So if a lot of people watching today or watch this go up to the Twitter link that I posted there, you can in Mukana. And you click on it and like it or retweet it, it causes, it messes with the algorithm. Go ahead, Stuart.
So long as somebody is professional on set or in the business, do we really care about their individual style so long as they fit in with what everybody else is wearing? Do we really care about if a woman wears a tie or a guy turns up in a kilt?
I mean, what I will say is that we were talking about in the pre-show, I think, is that until I started like showing up in meetings with a good camera and lighting and everything else, I didn't know what it was like to be a 6'4" Norwegian model. That wasn't my experience growing up. You look so much better than everyone else that everyone's just staring at you. You're like just like there's you're like completely look at an entirely different world. And if people are trying to get ahead, especially as we try to, online and try to get new jobs or sell new things or whatever, it may not be the only choice, but it helps. It helps a lot, And so you just want to kind of keep in mind that you're kind of dominating the situation by doing that.
There is a negative to that, Alex. There is a negative to that. It's when you turn up and you look better and you've got your presentation better than the people who are interviewing you. Sometimes it puts them a little off balance, or they think, no, that guy's better than us, so we won't hire him. Swings and roundabouts.
Hasn't been my experience so far. Go ahead, Chris.
I think it would be interesting to do a short presentation where we set up an actual boardroom or a meeting with the boss, and we do a spoof of people showing up with their Zoom presence in the boss's office.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
With their pajamas, their dog is barking, their kid is screaming.
You should do that.
Someone did that one on a phone
conference. Someone did that one on a phone conference a couple years ago, and we passed that around. We should do that in a conference room and have someone like flickering, like having the Wi-Fi break up.
I've seen that. I've seen that.
Should do it like PSA style. Like you wouldn't do that here, so would you?
Yeah, exactly. That's a pretty good one. Go ahead,
Didn't we do something like that back in early office hours? Like we captured Alex's living room and used that as like all of our backgrounds one day.
We did, but I think if only we could find a conference room. I mean, they're all so full right now. So anyway, go ahead, Jan.
You only get the first chance of making a first impression, and so it's important that you put out your best foot. And what we've done, if anyone who's looking at us on YouTube, you're saying, wow, everybody in there really looks good, but it just didn't happen overnight. Right. We built it up in the beginning. We used to have these sessions where we would critique everyone.
Oh, it's coming soon. We're going to do it again soon. The ruthless reviews are coming.
Return of ruthless reviews.
Yeah. And so, hey, be part of that. Be part of that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just for Chris's suggestion there is actually a short film with David Tennant and Georgia Moffat doing exactly what he just suggested with
nice.
Georgia Moffat playing a senior official in the British government.
Nice. Jeffrey?
One thing I will say for the other article is not on Zoom case. It's a different one of the other conferencing calls programs that I won't say the name, but it is not business casual. And I got to experience it over the weekend in a lot, and it was the audio.
You froze.
Oh, you froze mid-word.
See, that'll be part of the whole
Good
thing.
example.
Irony.
There you go.
On
Can you
the
hear me
word
now?
audio.
Recording this.
Anyway,
Okay, so the audio. So bottom line is that the audio for that program was.
No, it's not just
Okay.
your audio; it's your video. But Ken, to your point, I thought about that a little bit, and I think I'm probably going to edit it out. Like edit it. Take your point on that one, because it was something that I was like, oh, but it made sense, and I was trying to be. Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
I think the big thing is you establish street cred in a way that gives every remark that you made a certain validity
Right.
that the original argument never had.
Right,
And in
right,
fact, they went to say that that wasn't experience, that was just
Right.
conjecture.
Right.
And you're
right.
saying, no, this is the way it is. Pay
Right.
attention.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead, Jen.
What I wanted to say is also, like, presentation is very important. And this particular show has so much information to offer people. It's amazing what I've learned, and I know how many people in this room would agree with me. But one thing that really has always bothered me is that when you start the show, and there's somebody in the room that captures the pictures and sends it out, I noticed that if you look at the screen now, not everybody is looking at me. And only when I'm saying when you start the show, I think everybody should be looking forward and look like they're paying attention rather than sideways or down, whatever, drinking coffee. Just for that first second, I think that would be an important part of the presentation. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but
I completely agree with
throwing
you,
it out
Ken.
there.
I completely agree with you. Peter?
Well, I was just going to go back to your comment about retweeting your link. I think that ship has left dock already.
It's getting there.
Yeah, no, because I know I retweeted it last night within 5 minutes after
But the
we
more
had the nighttime show last
it
night.
just there's some retweets. It's not a huge retweet. It's not one of my most popular things out there. So, but it's retweeting. It's retweeting a little bit. So anyway,
I'm also gonna pass it into, because I don't think they would have seen it. The
Mhm.
researchers where I work, I work
probably.
for that particular company that publishes research articles.
No, that'd be good. Yeah, because it's the reason that I think it's so important, and the reason that I don't usually encourage people to go look for my tweets and retweet them. It's just that we have to push back. Like it's really important for what all of us are doing, either formally or informally. If that article becomes canon, for companies and people like that, it really damages the direction of what we're doing. And again, if we look back on what we did on Saturday was kind of a magical thing. Saturday afternoon, if you guys go back to look at that little building, the Raspberry Pi, like something opened up there, and that's kind of giving us a glimpse of what is possible, of what we're doing here. And it's just bad thinking is something that can slow things down a lot. So it's the reason that I'm pushing back so hard, and the reason I'm encouraging people to go retweet it and to like it, and to go to the Medium article and like it and push it, is because people pay attention to heat. So press pays attention to heat, and so if something's suddenly showing up everywhere and getting liked in all the places that it's showing up, people they may not talk to us, they may not talk to me, but they're gonna think about it. And when they think about doing the next article, they're gonna go, well, it's gonna make them feel a little, the intention of the article is to have the press feel a little uneasy about so quickly jumping on that article, like a little, to use it because it's someone out there who actually knows something about this going, yeah, that's not right. So, and if I don't get pulled forward to talk about it, I've got a lot more knives. So, Mike.
Hey, what are you, or is it under Twitter? Because I just tried to look you up and I couldn't find you.
Well, I'm just Alex Lindsay on Twitter. But there's a link directly to the tweet that I put into Makana. So it's up at 7:11 a.m. Next question.
Mark Harder of Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood in Brooklyn says, Mickey, which WLM preset is the office hours mic check based on? There's a link there. And also, are you using WLM Plus and just cutting off the true peak limiter for the screen scrape?
All right. Okay. Here, let me spotlight the meters. Yeah. So what I set for the meters is that our method is EBU, which means that it would try to filter out background noise and only meter what it sees as the foreground sound. And the weighting is ITU 1770, which is a special weighting curve which takes into account humans' perception of sounds across the frequency range. And I believe this is the same. These are the same specifications that YouTube recommends in terms of measuring loudness.
Great. Next question.
Moving on, JJ McKenna of Santa Venetia, Marin County, California. Is there any meaningful reason to use original sound? It seems that usually folks are being told to turn it off on our panel.
You will sound better in original sound when left, if your environment is ready for it. The reason we have people turn it off is that if their whatever their system isn't removing some kind of background noise, the original or the Zoom will. So if you have some kind of noise assist or noise reduction or no noise, you don't need it. Your original sound will sound cleaner and better. But if you don't have those tools, then it actually works pretty well. Go ahead, Bill, and then George, and then Greg.
Yeah, if I had been okay with staying out in the voice booth for these 300 days, I would have it on every day, so original sound was passing through. But since I wanted to live in the community of humans, I'm in the house, there's just creaks, rattles, air conditioning, little things that are bad sounds that if you suppress them, does make it easier to understand me.
Good, George, and then Greg, and then Mickey.
Yeah, original sound definitely exposes every flaw in your audio. I think it may even change the codec possibly. To Opus or something, so it's pretty high res, and you really got to have good sound. This processing in Zoom is very heavy handed, but it's pretty darn good. It covers a lot of sins, so just make sure your audio is clean before you try using it in the real world.
Yeah, Greg.
Yeah, it can also if you have if you turn on original sound, it can bump up your level by maybe 2 dB. If you turn off original sound, it'll drop your level just a little bit. So if you're having trouble finding just that right spot, but I'd always have it on if I could.
Mickey?
And other advantages of turning on original sound is if you have high fidelity music mode on, it bumps up the sampling rate to 48K and also allows you to broadcast in stereo.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good reasons to have it on, but with great power comes great responsibility. So it means that your whole system has to be cleaner to make it work. Next question.
Ruben Marchena of Grand Rapids, Michigan says, I'm planning on setting up my Pi4 into a streaming solution for my ATEM Mini Pro. Pi or PL? Hard to see what
it's a Pi. It's a Raspberry Pi.
Oh, Pi4. Okay. Can I use it to be a hyperdeck as well?
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Well, the answer is out. Yes, it works fine as a playback unit. The catch is you can't record to it, unlike a real hyperdeck, which has in.
And also, I wouldn't stream from the same Pi that I was doing a play out with. So I don't think.
No, that too. But I mean, the reality is there's no easy way in to the into that unit other than FTP or using the Chrome interface drag and drop.
Go ahead, Stuart, then Roscoe.
There is a project I was sent a link to early last week where you can use a HDMI to USB style capture card with a Raspberry Pi, but the limit appears to be that you need to overclock the Pi and it tops out at around 24 frames on HD. So it's not yet a realistic option.
There's a point where you're just like, you're hot rodding a Chevette. Like let's be clear. Like, at some point you just got to go, okay, maybe you should just get a better car, a bigger car. I mean, the Raspberry Pi is amazing. And the idea that we could do play out, I've been playing out this video, I think, since Saturday, just to see how long the Pi would go. We're going to keep on coming back to it every once in a while, but still cooking. But so it's incredible for background stuff that you can just cut to, for other things like that. It's a great, the playout B is there, but the Raspberry Pi is it's a little car. Like, just be careful not to start using it too widely, or expecting to do too much. You might blow the headers. All right, Roscoe.
Yeah, well, you may not want to use it as a streamer. It does work as a catcher. So there is the Raspberry Pi, which replaces that stream bridge from ATEM.
Yep. Next question.
Kyle Hammond of Chicago says he has a Final Cut Pro motion question. Trying to do a fake live stream overlay of emojis and reacts. Is there a simple way to achieve this?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
The simplest way is to get a package from somebody like Motion VFX, who has a motion overlay called Social Media that will do that kind of thing. They're great in that you can open them inside Motion and customize all the content to your heart's content, but it's much easier than trying to vectorize something like floating hearts inside the program. I mean, it's possible to do, but it's a real PITA.
Yeah, you can buy those. You can buy the icons and you can put them in, and you would use some kind of particle system, typically to just to emit them. But again, Motion VFX will save you a lot of time as far as putting that together. It's they make great cheat sheets. I mean, it's just kind of amazing. And I take them, I get them, and then I pull them apart. Like, oh, I like that part of what they're doing, and I'm gonna turn all the other stuff off, and I use it in something, and I learn more about how to build something. It's a really, really great site. Next question.
David Brady of New York says, I picked up a small teleprompter kit that John Edelson referenced a few weeks back. I was hoping to use a surplus 5-inch Gen 1 Blackmagic Design video assist, but it's too chunky. Any alternatives to look at in the 5-inch monitor space? And if it had image inverting, that would be awesome too.
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, it won't do hardware inversion, but Feel World makes a cheap one that should do you pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, John.
And I did the Field World 7-inch, and it fits in there. You just have to unscrew the battery pack that's on the back, and then it's flatter. And the 7-inch is a little wider than a teleprompter screen, but you want to be focused on the center anyway. So
we use the Lilliput's for it because they have quarter 20s on the sides, which means that we could print these little slots that we could build our own little teleprompters that would fit in your backpack. But the key was the quarter 20s on the side. Next question.
Coming up, Hector Rodriguez of Springfield, Virginia says, anyone using the new offering from Microsoft, Teams webinars? If yes, any comments?
Stuart.
I had to install Teams for a job interview, and since then, Mickey has been telling me to turn off original sound.
So yeah, it's funny. I think that Teams is such a vertical that I barely ever see it. Like, I see it every once in a while. I'm like, oh, they're using Teams, but it is so rare for me to see Teams, and maybe it's just the culture that I'm in or whatever. I mean, I see a lot of Blue Jeans, a lot of WebEx, a lot of Google, Meet, but almost never Teams. Go ahead, George.
Seems to be used more in some corporate environments, or like when they went ultra secure kind of networks for like video game production. Since it's all done remotely now and all the talent is everywhere in the world, they need the most secure systems possible. So they use it a little bit.
Yep, absolutely. Peter, and then Sky.
Yeah, keep in mind any corporation that has adopted Office 365 has Teams, whether they and in my personal case, the corporation I work for has publicly said they're deprecating WebEx in place of and using Teams instead.
Anybody who gets rid. Well, I think Teams is better than WebEx. WebEx is pretty rough. Sky.
I believe I'm trying to think what I can say.
No, you don't have to say anything. We can just move on. We have a lot of questions.
Well, the point.
You don't have to raise your hand and go, okay. Well,
it's Microsoft is not known for being first to market, but they are known to be, once they go into that market, they're going actively, and I guess that's what I can say is the fall will be a different experience for teams.
Interesting. All right, Bill.
Yeah, I've actually been working in it a good little bit because I have a client who's a relatively big corporation, and they're moved to it because of that. They were on WebEx for a while, and that did not work out for them, so they moved over there. I am kind of surprised that the last few seminars I've done with Apple, for any reason, they've been kind of standardizing on WebEx. So I'm wondering if there's some.
I don't think they've been standardizing on WebEx. I don't think they chose that recently.
Oh, you think it's just been a long time coming?
A lot of big companies have used all kinds of web services for a decade.
I know nothing on the inside, but I'm just wondering if that might be an acquisition somewhere if they ever want to get in that space. And again, I know nothing about that. I'm just saying it's surprising to me how dedicated they seem to be to that for their public facing stuff.
I think that's just what they know how to do. Next question.
Jonathan Swan, excuse me, Jonathan. Is there any reason to set the native resolution, project resolution in OBS to 1920 by 1080 when using it as a virtual camera in Zoom that is set at 1280 by 720? Does it provide any benefits?
If you're recording it, it does. Like if you record your show and you had graphics and you had other things like that, the video might be softer, but everything else will look nicer. And if you're streaming it out, if you're using Zoom sources, it just depends on what you think is the long-term use of the footage. But outside of that, I don't think it really makes any difference. Anybody else? Next question.
Johnny Estias in Manila says, just got my Bluetooth AVIO adapter to play around with Clubhouse. Mickey, how are you sending audio into Clubhouse today?
I'm running a test of sending office hours to Clubhouse, and I'm just using an IK multimedia, what do you call this, iRig.
And it's working well?
So far, I mean, I've asked a couple of people to have a listen, and it seems to be working okay.
Great. Greg?
It's not just okay. It sounds fantastic, quite frankly.
Probably sounds better than this because you've got
it's got Mickey Magic.
It's very clean. It's very clear. It's really, really good.
Okay. All right. George?
We simulcasted our show last night to Clubhouse for the very first time, and I fed it out of the Rodecaster Pro's TRRS into the little $10 dongle, Lightning, and awesome.
Yeah, we've been talking about it. We do them on Wednesday night. We do them directly, but to get this mic into it, I go through I have the Audinate as a Bluetooth to Dante, and so it just attaches to my phone as
God's Bluetooth adapter.
Yeah, it's just a little link with a PoE, and then I've got I have a Scorpio for my mixer, so it's got a Dante built in, so it just goes right out to.
Since I got your ear, Alex, when you go into Bluetooth mode, I know there's like two different profiles for Bluetooth, right? There's like a hands-free profile. And then there's just a receive audio profile. What's it doing there? Because I know it always deprecates the sound quality coming in from a microphone when you're in the hands-free mode.
I think that what it's trying to do is do echo cancellation. I think the hands-free mode is the echo cancellation. That they turn it on. Where it's receive only, they don't have it. I think that's and so you have that cutout that can come into it. I think is the I believe. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's the case. But Mickey, we should get that in. We have a club now. We have the Office Hour Club, so we should get you into that club, and then we can have you create the events inside the club. We can just do it every day.
Yeah, I don't think I'm in the club yet, but yeah, I'll have a look.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'll invite you in. All right.
Some of us have a few extra invites.
Yeah. Next question.
Meredith AV from Thunder Bay says, are there any economical...
Maverick AV.
Oh, Maverick. Oh, what did I say? Excuse me. Are there any economical solutions to take the output of an EVC USB webcam and getting it into an ATEM Mini, basically a USB to HDMI adapter? Is there an online homemade provider? There is an online homemade provider, but it doesn't look robust. We've been dealing with this for months and months.
For the second day in a row, respectfully, nope.
It's respectfully. I was wondering when eventually Blackmagic breaks down and just gives us a USB switcher. Like they could have it could be the ATEM Micro, or something like that with like 4 little USB inputs that will cut your USB cameras together. I think that there's part of me that thinks that would be really exciting. Part of me would be like, oh, that's so sad. But it would be a really popular switcher. Like if they had $150, $200 switcher that just took C920s, they probably sell more of those than they've sold of anything else they've ever made. Like it makes me just go, oh, I don't know if I should even suggest it, but they probably would sell so many because then you would really have this little switcher, and they take away all the, like make it really simple. And you can just switch between the stuff, and it's just a bunch of 920s. When you think about it, it'd be like $500. You could have like a little 4-camera.
Everybody could have their cable access Wayne's World channel.
Oh yeah.
We've been chewing on this though since at least April, because that was when I was trying to get my 920s.
Someone had brought it up. Yeah, someone brought it up earlier, and I was like, that's a horrible idea. And the more I've thought about it, I'm like, oh, it's probably a really good idea. Jan?
Well, it seems that we've created a lot of different things that we've wanted just by you saying, let's start something going. And next thing you know, we've got it, so what should we do?
So we'll see. Yeah, exactly. Stuart?
BMD wouldn't do a hardware-based switcher of that. They would buy vMix or OBS.
I don't think so. I think that they would. I think that they would. Yeah, they can't buy OBS because it's open source, but but I don't think that. But I think that there actually is a bunch of good reasons to have like a little USB switcher. Anyway, Chris and then Guy.
If we're only not directly to the question, but just USB switching USB to out to USB, isn't that, as long as the camera or the webcam is already doing the processing, isn't there just like a KVM thing or something that you can just like literally switch?
Really,
from?
not to. You still got to frame it. You got to clock it up.
USB
so
to HDMI is not simple. That's what everybody told me.
Good.
We had people trying to engineer it with Raspberry Pis.
Yeah, I would say that there's an economical solution. There is the one that Jeffrey brought up that's from Taiwan that's super sketchy looking. That's basically an Android device, and it's $159, so it's not worth it in that regard. But to your point, Alex, there is a device currently on the market that I use to church stream every Sunday that's been really solid. It's called the YOLO Box, and it's a touch screen, $799, 2 HDMI in plus a USB camera. So 3 inputs in all, and it's been solid. At first, I kind of poo-pooed the thing. It had a rough out the gate launch. I had some issues with it, but now it's been super stable. I haven't had any issues with it in 20 plus live streams every Sunday. So not a single. Well, it'll dip down.
I'm thinking that market though is like $200, $250. Like for, and then you can buy a bunch of little USB cameras. Would be. I keep on thinking if you look at what we were doing on Saturday again, to go back to that over and over and over again. If everybody had like a relatively inexpensive kit where they could have the overhead of what they're working on and a shot of them, and they can just cut back and forth, and it wasn't, it was a little piece of hardware, like they could plug it into anything. It would just show up as a webcam. I think that there'd be a market where it was, but I think at $799 or whatever, I think it's probably more. Whereas at $150, $200 with a bunch of webcams, you get to that $700, $800, $900 range, and you've got 4-camera shoot, which is kind of stunning. Mickey, you can of course do it with OBS. I mean, right now, but it's OBS. Anyway, Mickey, and then Peter.
Yeah, I'm curious, Guy, and this would be something that a box like this would have to solve. Like, how does it deal with the delay between the HDMI inputs and also the USB camera? I would imagine the USB camera would be a bit more delayed compared to something coming in through HDMI.
It seems pretty fast. And I mean, we're taking the audio from the house sound, and I bring in a second audio source I bring in a mix pre to church. It's kind of funny, but so I tap the house sound, and then I feed it into my mix pre. And so the audio is not, it's just another shot that we use as a huddle cam. So I can use it as another source because we have PTZ cameras that are taking up the HDMIs. So I needed one more camera for just kind of a safety shot. And so the huddle cam is brought in through USB.
Go, Peter.
Yeah, if we did the show titles, bringing the mixed breed to church should be today's show title.
It's just a mixed breed D. It was an 833, but then that got sold, and so now it's a mixed breed D to church.
Go ahead, Peter.
So I was going to say, answering the question as asked, I don't think it would ever be cost effective. Unless they could get it down, unless Blackmagic or somebody could get down to a device like their little boxes that they use for converting HDMI to SDI. as requested. The device you postulated makes much more sense, and not have and as you said, an ATEM micro, whatever you want to call it, but it's just designed to take USB webcams in its own right and not worry about HDMI at all.
Oh no, I would definitely say not HDMI. This would be literally like a USB switcher. Like it would just be a USB camera switcher. Go ahead, Chris, and then we'll move on.
What about? And I don't know if these are available anymore, but these B-Links that are $200 a pop, and they're full PC computers.
They're available.
Throw OBS on this thing, and you've got 4 USBs in and 2 HDMI out.
It's just that you can't.
I don't know.
You can do it with software. I'm just saying that there is a like having a hardware switcher, a small hardware switcher on my desk. I have no interest in software switchers, like for doing what I'm doing when I'm doing it, except for when I'm doing like a real event. I might use Mimo Live for something where I've got a bunch of things that have to all be stacked up, and I can build all the little bits and pieces. But I wouldn't go back to OBS from a hardware switcher, because being able to sit over here and tap on something is useful. Peter?
Well, just to be clear, we're all talking about software switchers. It's the level of dedication to the software that's running into the switcher. Do I really want a full Windows 10 system?
Well,
what that B-Link would be doing? Yeah, probably not.
I get to watch a lot of people crash their OBSs. That's all on the show.
I was agreeing with
you. Like with weird audio and things crashing and things going. Like it's always just kind of over time. It just kind of wears down my interest in using it. Go ahead. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, and here in the panel. Often, how would you make the Grammys better? What went wrong and what went right?
We talked about that a lot yesterday. Go ahead, Stuart.
An injection of taste.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Knives out.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So yeah, I did like the flower. I thought the flower was great. Like the little animated flower that they had in the animations. I thought that was really good. I will say that I thought that from a production perspective, it was probably the cleanest one we've seen, the cleanest like COVID event that we've seen so far. Some of the taste stuff was a little off for me, but I don't know if I'm the target audience anymore. Go ahead, Bill.
It's exactly what I was going to say. Just like when I was growing up and the Rolling Stones offended our parents, if they're not offending people, they may not be doing their job in terms of giving kids a way to rebel against everything. And I understand it. It felt maybe too over the edge to me, but again, I'm not the target audience. I'm not going to consume music for the rest of my life the way the kids are.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
I was watching it with my 12-year-old daughter, and she's watching these artists and she's loving it. And I'm texting with my mom at the same time, who's, completely turned off by it. And I'm like, Mom, do you remember this guy named Elvis?
Yeah,
that's all. It's just context. Remember
they
Elvis?
Picketed, they burned his records.
Yeah. All right. Next question.
Victor Cajallo, our friend Brooks in South Dakota. Can Bill Davis do a tutorial of how he built the grid for the remotes video? I hadn't really set up for it, and I hadn't seen this thing coming. If you give me a little time, I guess I can pull up on the graph.
We haven't. You broke it down a fair bit in the
I did
on the
actually.
Saturday. So if you go back onto the Saturday session that we did, you should be able to find Bill talking about it.
I did a full hour, and I actually and if you want to go look at that and then come back and ask me a specific question of what I did in somewhere, happy to answer.
Yep. Next question.
Okay, Steve Fisher of Pittsburgh says, after changing passwords on Zoom on a Zoom account, I get an error message when attempting to use Zoom OSC. The password is known good. Any input from the chat on what might be up? Running Zoom OSC 4.0.4 B1093.
It's an Andy question. I don't think if only we could call Andy in and bring him in. He's not here today.
I just wonder, have you tried all the normal things, like to make sure that you didn't accidentally put a space in front of the first character or some weird thing like that in passwords? Passwords drive me nuts because half the time there's some little hidden character that I didn't know I put in.
You go, Stuart.
I'm just wondering if maybe Steve signed in on 2 devices at the same time and it hasn't logged him out of the first one before it's logged him into the one that's running Zoom OSC.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Sorry, we don't have a better answer. Next question.
Looks like Lewandowski, that's all it says in terms of a name here, from Pittsburgh. Suggestions for a free or affordable one-time use live chat that can be embedded using iFrame on a web page for use alongside a Boxcast live stream for our viewers participants. Oh, it's Phil Lewandowski from Cleveland. Sorry.
I don't know affordable ones. I think a lot of people use Slido. Mukana is not really affordable because it takes us so much work to set it up for people right now. So it's not the easiest one for us to just set up for folks. I've been working all week on a project. Let's see. Slido is the only one that I've seen people use regularly, and I don't know what the cost is. I don't know whether that's affordable or not. That's all I got. All right, go ahead, George.
Do I dare mention StreamYard?
Well, no, StreamYard will do it, but I think he wants to do it next to something he already has running. So he's already got the video part of it going. StreamYard would do the whole thing. You're absolutely right.
It just bundles everything. It's the lazy answer. It works pretty well.
Yeah. Next question.
Jan Landy of Las Vegas is up next with, I'm a Mac user using Gmail. I find that I now have contacts in both iCloud and Google, and I'm looking for a solution to consolidate contact information so I can get rid of all the duplicates. Anyone have any ideas?
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
I know there is a sync program and an opportunity that will link both your contacts list, and maybe Jason knows what it is, the real name of it, but there is a solution. Sorry, I don't have the name.
Go ahead, Jason.
The solution is you need to decide one thing that will indeed be your sync from thereafter, and then consolidate it exactly once. Both Mac OS and Google can do this pretty well, but there's no getting around the fact that you're still going to need to review them, as they are accepted, or deal with the consequences. Hit me up on Discord, and I'm happy to help. But yeah, it's a pain no matter how you slice it.
Go ahead, Peter.
I can say if you're using Gmail through the web browser, that causes its own set of issues. But if you've actually told either the Mac mail client or your favorite mail client on a Mac that you have both Gmail and a regular mail account, it will consolidate your contacts for you. You just have to tell it to do it. You have to enable it, and it's in the privacy settings.
Go ahead, JJ.
I had to do this with a heavy iCloud user, and what they ended up using was just the Google portion because everything else was on the iCloud that they could use for the computer at home. So they started adopting the Google platform for that.
I have to admit, I use
Peter's. They didn't work well the other way.
I have both Google accounts and Exchange accounts and everything else. All of that goes into my Apple Mail, and all of it goes into my mail on my phone and everything else. And then when I have a connection that I want to keep, I just say, add to contacts, and it adds it to my Apple environment. I don't really go back and try to fix anything. I just keep on adding people to my contacts as needed. It's probably not the most efficient, but it seems to work pretty well. I can usually find most people. Mickey?
Yeah, like what Jason mentioned, you have to pick which one you want to actually stick to and use. And from the other platform that you're not going to end up using, you can export the vCard, both vCard file, both iCloud and also Google are capable of doing that. And you then import that vCard into the platform you're going to use.
Yep, go ahead, Jan.
Just so you understand, so I have an iPhone, and so when I want to text somebody that's not in my Apple contact, the number doesn't show up. But I use Gmail as a regular thing, and so if I don't have it in the Gmail, then I can't when I type their address.
But is your Gmail going into your Apple Mail? Is Gmail?
It's the other way around. I have Apple going into Gmail. In other words, I very rarely check my Apple Mail. I do it the other way.
Well, that's why. That's why you're having so much trouble. Sorry. If you're a Mac user and you go outside of the mail environment, it's, like using mail to manage that stuff, you're in never land. Like it will always be painful. Like I work with folks that do this all the time. And you either, as a Mac user, you kind of decide, well, I'm going to have everything go into the Apple version of that. I have never seen anybody have a bunch of Macs and use a bunch of other devices and not be complaining to me about it at some point. Like, oh, I got all this stuff everywhere. Because if you use the Apple products, it all works. If you use Gmail or something else outside of those products, it all gets messy, And so you just have to know that you're kind of you're making your life hard. You may have good solid reasons to do so, but it is harder. John, and then Peter.
There's an email app for the Apple environment called Spark. I have to live in both the Apple environment and the Google environment because Gmail is the university mail. And it's interesting to see how one will spam filter one thing and not the other. So take a look at Spark. It's
I just have all my Gmail going into Apple Mail. Like I just have all of my accounts going to Apple Mail. I've got like 8 accounts that all just file into Apple Mail. And then so they're all just in the same environment. I don't have to switch environment. It's when and the reason I say this is that I was using the Gmail app on the phone for a while because I was doing, and I used something Exchange or whatever, Outlook or whatever on the computer. And for a bunch of reasons, I tried to keep it separate. And this was a decade ago, and it was just chaos. Like my whole world just was unwrapping, and I just put it all in the mail, and everything was fine.
Don't you like to search in Google, searching your mail more than searching Apple?
Sure. I don't do that very much. I mean, I search for someone's name or whatever, and I find that the Apple one is relatively good as long it's the Google one is absolutely better. But I've never had that much trouble finding an old email made in the last 12 years. Like usually I had a big server switch over 12 years ago. So before that, it's hard. After that, I can find anything. And I've got, a couple 100,000 emails in there.
The only solution I could figure out is to duplicate everything. And then I have it in both environments, but then it gets so big.
If you're using 2 different mail clients, it will just be a sickness that continues forever. Like just know that it's not like you have to pick one or the other, as Jason said. But if you're using 2 email clients, it will never get better. It will never get better, and you'll fix it for a minute, and then it'll just go back to it's endemic. You have to use one mail client, or know that life is just going to be hard. And you might have some good
pendulums.
Like anyway,
that's the way to think about it.
We talked about it a lot because you know why? Do you know why we went long on this one? Was because there wasn't enough questions. There wasn't enough questions, so I was like, well, we'll just let this one roll out. All right, go ahead, Peter. Last word, and then we'll move on.
Well, I get the one thing to remember, and it's really your point. I mean, I use my email, the iOS mail client on my iPhone for all my mail types, work, and Gmail, and there's another one which is really designed for catch-all. I select them, and because most people it's kind of hidden, but you can select different signature blocks based upon which email system you're in. Right. So work from play is easily separated. But the other thing is Siri doesn't care. Once it's in that Mac client, Siri will recognize new contacts and give you, do you want to save this contact? It doesn't care. It's because it's scanning the file itself, not the source.
Yeah. So it just makes it super, super easy. And I guess for me, mail is also, I will admit my mail is not as important to me. I check it a couple times a day, but almost all my interactions are on Signal or other text solutions. So the Signal one is hard to search because my messages mostly disappear after a day. All right, next question.
JJ McKenna, Santa Venetia, says, in consideration of the creep or leap, depending on your perspective, toward augmented reality, has there been a good integration of audio gear such as bone conduction headphones with a wearable heads-up display?
Yeah, Jason.
I got to do it again. Respectfully, nope.
Well, I will say Google Glass was amazing. Like Google Glass was really great.
Yeah, it was amazing, but it was a big beta. That was the problem with it.
Well, the only problem with it was people being inappropriate with their cameras. I mean, outside of that, that's what really annihilated Google Glass. But it was that, and that it wasn't really easy to use with prescription glasses. It was a difficult integration. I had one, or I was on the early tests, and there was a little problem with it weighting to one side a little bit, and so I think that integrating it, the next generation integrating with just a pair of glasses is going to makes sense since genetically we're all moving towards nearsightedness anyway. Stuart, and then JJ.
The problem with all of those heads-up displays for your eyes is it will give you the same sort of fatigue that we have if we're looking at screens and monitors all the time. But one thing to realize what is coming is neural link, and it'll all be done inside the skull instead. So don't even worry about wearing glasses.
I don't think I'm gonna do that in my lifetime.
I am not gonna do that.
I'm gonna let that one simmer for a decade. JJ.
Well, my query was also towards the audio. So is there an integration between the audio channel and using like what we hear around us, such as folks who use bone conduction headphones all the time, or they have the where you can open ear channel
I think we're going to see more of what Apple does with it, which is the transparency setting. So the AirPod Pros have transparency where they just either let stuff in or let stuff out. I think that as having the AirPod Pros, my strong preference is being able to just tap them and have the world disappear rather than having to have something else that I got to figure out. Having something, if I could, I probably would leave something in my ears all day if the battery would last long enough. And then I could just go, I don't want to listen to this anymore. And I just want to listen to what I'm doing. And so, I actually, about 80% of the day, I want to not listen to what's going on around me. So I think that I think I would always want to have the option of just tapping something and having it just go away. Next question.
James Babbitt here in San Diego says, "Hi, Alex. How is the Raspberry Pi playout B connected in your system?"
The playout B is connected via HDMI. I don't have any easy way to let's see if I turn this camera on, but it's connected via HDMI to the input of my switcher. My switcher and the playout B share a switch, so they see each other, and that's it. And then you hit play, and it works. So that's how it works. Next question.
Second to last one of the morning and regular stuff. Mark Harder of Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn says, if one is trying to load Chrome into a Teradici window 2019 server on AWS and don't already have a stored image in the Chrome installer, how might someone do that? I tried Internet Explorer and it wouldn't let me. 1FGF mentions shutting off Windows Server security to install things. Any thoughts? And he's working from a Mac.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, on a Mac, that was a curveball. I was going to say you can do it in the command line. Get Mac apps, I think, is the thing that'll give you the quick script. On Windows, it's Ninite, and that's easy. NINITE.com.
Go ahead, Guy.
So this is the trouble that a lot of people run into when they first fire up an instance is they try to open up IE and they just keep getting hit with these security things. And you can go into the server manager and disable it. And I put the link in the chat as to how to do that. What Tucker showed, the way to get around it so you don't even touch it, is that you just install Chrome. And if you don't have the download, because you need IE to get Chrome, you actually RDP-in for the first time, download Chrome on your Mac or PC locally, and then you copy that, just go to the icon, the installer, hit copy, go back to RDP, hit paste, and it'll paste the installer like on your desktop or wherever you want it to go, and then you can launch it from there.
That's great. Next question.
Michael Fraley with the last one from Dallas-Fort Worth. Does anyone know of a workaround for getting an older program to install on a Mac OS 10.13.6 when the highest it can be installed on is OS 10.7?
Go ahead, Jason.
10.7 is going to be tricky, but I'd say your best bet would be a virtual machine like Parallels or VMware.
Yeah, you'd have to do something like that. It's not going to. The libraries are all different. It's not, you can force it to. The reason it doesn't want to install is because if you install it, it won't. The stuff it's looking for isn't there anymore. So you can go into the house, but there's no rooms for it, or there's no bathroom, or there's no kitchen, or there's something. Right. There's a whole bunch of things that are missing.
Right now, it thinks it's a corrupt file and wants me to eject it.
Yeah,
it's relying on system files that haven't existed for years.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's looking for system libraries that don't exist anymore. But that's why it's not installed.
Yeah, I was just trying to inexpensive workaround. I've got an older Tascam DAW interface that I was trying to make work with my Harrison mix bus, and been shut down at every turn here.
You get an older machine, an older Mac, install it, and then use Dante to between the two to move the audio from one to the other.
That would
and you'd be
absolutely
set.
work.
That would work. So an older machine with an older Mac Mini with hooked to it with the older operating system, and
that's really
DVS.
not a bad idea.
You got to make sure the DVS will work on it. That's the problem then. George.
Well, I've got a Windows XP.
Right. Yeah. So
that
so you
it will install on.
There you go. Yeah. So using it as basically a Dante stage box.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's in your office. It's a funny way to do
although
it.
I don't know, if the Windows XP will even talk Dante.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Go ahead, George.
I was going to say, you just use all your old computers as appliances now. Just they do specific jobs, and just connect the right I/O on them. You're good.
That's what I do with my Mac Mini. I mean, and like this is my my older laptop it just does this. That's all it does. It just does drawing. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just don't get that XP machine on the internet. Keep it separate.
Oh man, yeah. There's a whole lot of things there will make you so sad.
So you can use it for an ATM, then you're fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask next week how to hook up my Image Writer 1 to my iPhone.
All right.
So
Shifting
many
gears.
NDAs that I could be talking about,
Yeah.
but I won't.
All right. So we're shifting gears. And so pretty excited to talk about this. What we are talking about now in the second hour is, basically acoustics, basically what you do to the room, or how do you manage the room. We've talked about mics, we've talked about preamps, we've talked about filtering, we've talked about mixing, but it's as important oftentimes, or more important than the mic, is what's surrounding it. What is your environment like? And this is something that George Whittam was kind enough to offer to come in and talk about. And George, you do this all day, every day, right? This is kind of your thing.
Yeah, and my listeners, my audience, my clients, they're 99% actors. So I'm explaining it in a way that they can grasp. And
how do you explain it? How do you explain it to an actor?
Good question. And I only came up with this analogy, I don't know, in the last year. And what I tell them is that your room acoustics to your microphone is the lighting to your photo. Mm-hmm. And people tend to get that, because most actors have been in front of a camera, even voice actors who are my clients. Most of them are most of them have done some on-camera work, and they understand that conceptually on some level. It's so much easier to visualize that. And so when I tell them you can buy a $10,000 camera and shoot in the dark, you can buy a $10,000 mic and set it up in a racquetball court. It's going to sound like garbage. So that's kind of where I start with the whole idea of how important acoustics are.
Right. That's great. Yeah, I oftentimes talk to people about, I think of them as mirrors. A flat wall, something that's flat and hard is like a mirror. And it's just sending that audio right back, to it. So how do you approach it when you get started? How do you approach someone wanting to build something in their house or whatever? What are kind of the basics?
Well, the most expensive problem to fix in acoustics is isolation. Mm-hmm. And so, we always focus on when somebody's in a residence, and, almost everything in voiceover now is residentially recorded, although it's shifting a little bit again. But so we always have to start with, where can you find quiet in your house? I'll just start with my own apartment here in Venice is terrible. It's got windows on all sides, 3 sides. There's an airport right here, Santa Monica Airport. The quietest place, if I had to do this for a living, is the master bath, which would be, there's 2 bathrooms, thankfully, but that would be a nightmare acoustically. But it is the quietest space. It does have the best isolation. It has no windows. And that is the cheap thing to do, is to find somewhere quiet. No matter how inconvenient it is, how small it is, we can fix the acoustics, but we need to deal with the quiet first. So that's where we always start, is trying to find where that is in their home. And then after that, we focus on making it sound not like a box.
And for today, how do we make it not sound like a box?
Right. We'll definitely focus on that. Making it sound not like a box is, first of all, not buying what is advertised as acoustical treatment on Amazon a lot of the time. A lot of the stuff that you see is very superficially acoustically effective. Those reflection filter backstop things, you see that they're sold with microphones that go behind it. Mm-hmm. I've set up a few of them. I've seen quite a few of them, and I fell victim to it years ago. But a lot of them just have a very squishy foam that's so not dense that the foam is really actually more. The foam they're using is more akin to a windscreen than acoustical treatment. Right. Remember, the whole point of one of these is to allow sound to pass through. So if you make if you make acoustical panels out of this stuff, what's it going to do? Nothing. And that's a real common problem. And people end up with the wrong foam, cheap foam, or just too thin. They end up with a 1 or 2 inch thick foam paneling that you can buy very cheaply. Comes vacuum packed in a size of like a backpack, and then you cut open the plastic bag and it swells into this massive thing like a bed, you know? And you have all this squishy foam, and it's woefully inadequate to treat the mid to low range of the human voice. And that's where we're fighting. That's where we start. How do we get rid of that?
And what kind of materials do you use?
If it's closet, the ideal situation for any voice actor, if they're lucky enough to have a walk-in closet that already has enough space and clothing on it, let's say at least 2 walls, that is awesome, because now you have this massive, thick, dense, sound-absorbing material that is very good at controlling the whole frequency spectrum of the voice. It sucks up all the low end, gets rid of the resonance, and then you just have to deal with a wall or two and maybe hang a blanket, a sound blanket, a moving blanket on those 2 blank walls to get rid of that early reflection, that first thing that the sound bounces off of. If you're starting from a blank slate, the sound blanket solution has become very popular because it's very inexpensive. You can buy a lot of it very cheaply. And you can kill off a huge amount of surface area with some of these sound blankets very cost effectively. The next step up from there would be panels that you either make yourself or purchase that they're usually starting at about 2 inches thick, and they have an insulation inside. One popular one is Owens Corning 703, but I prefer rockwool because it's a lot less toxic. And think about it, when you're putting these panels and things into this small box where you're going to be sitting and breathing and all day, you want to use the lowest VOC, lowest toxicity stuff you can get your hands on, really. So you really want to look for that. And so that's what we do. We just try to kill off all the reflections with materials that are thick and dense enough to control essentially the full voice spectrum.
And one of the things that I think is also choosing how much of the room you cover, right? You don't want to necessarily wallpaper the room with absorption, right?
Yeah, this is a big debated thing, because I think we are always thinking in the context, most of the time for many of us, in the context of music recording and music studios that we've seen, which have quite a lot of exposed wood. They have a very good array of diffusion, which is a different thing than absorption. Where I've been focusing on absorption here in this talk, but diffusion is all about scattering the sound. And diffusion is a great thing to have if you have it. One of the best things in the world is clutter. So the more cluttered your space is, the better.
I've got that nailed.
We got it nailed. I got it.
The only clean place in my room is right behind me. See this part that you see here? This is the nice, that's the only orderly part of this office.
Exactly. When I see a clean slate room, I'm like, we got a lot of work. You got any bookshelves? Got any books? Go to the yard sale. Go buy a bunch of books. Make yourself look smart, because a wall full of books is an awesome diffusion thing, because all the books are different shapes. The sound hits it and scatters in a million directions. So I lost my train of thought. I got so excited.
By the way, if you have questions for George or many of the experts that we have here in our audio panel, go ahead and put them into Makana right now.
But just to be clear, everything that I'm talking about today, pretty much all of it is from real world experience. I studied music. I have a music recording and engineering background. And it was just through the portals of life that I ended up in this voiceover thing. And in the last 15 years of working in this voiceover thing, I've gotten better and better at dealing with these weird little spaces. And, it's really interesting, like the voiceover or the acoustical treatment of a really small space, it's not in any of the books. I bought most of them and looked for how do you treat a small room. And in those books, a small room is 8 feet by 10 feet. So all the math breaks apparently when it gets really small, which must explain why. It probably explains why most of the companies that make these prefabricated voiceover ISO booths, a lot of them don't get the acoustics right. They just miss it. I'm always tuning people who have bought these $10,000 boxes and tuning them to fix what they bought, and they are like, "What? How can I possibly need to fix what I just bought?"
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, like I just want to amplify what George mentioned. Like this is a whole lot of it depends on what you're using the room for. Like if you're recording drums, you don't want a dead room. You want a nice live room for that, or an acoustic piano. You want the live room for that. But if you're gonna do voiceovers, you want it nice and dead. And there, you can go really deep into it and talk about niche stuff. Like say, if you want to record Foley, the treatment of the floors is totally different. And I think Greg can chime in regarding that and how things differ. Things are different when you're building out the Foley stage as opposed to any other kind of stage.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I want to be really clear that, my perspective, having been focusing on voiceover recording the last 12, 15 years, is really around tuning a room to sound really good for voiceover. But he's exactly right. There's context for everything. And this is why the best recording studios in the world know how to do this. They have all these huge moving gobo things that they can arrange around the microphone. And so there's a lot of acoustical changes that you make to a room for what you're recording.
I think we talked about this on another hour, but one of the big upsets at Capitol Records was they had that studio in Capitol Records that had not been touched for 50 years. And then they decided to upgrade it, and it was the same dimensions, and it had high tech, but it turned out the tar from all those cigarettes had a certain acoustic sound to it that was just impossible to reproduce, and they spent millions trying to get it back to where it was, before they tore it, because it was this old junky studio to them. It was like, oh, it doesn't look very nice, and it looks, it was built in the 40s or 50s or 60s, something like that. It was just like very old and decrepit, and let's make it great. And then when they made it great, they couldn't get the sound back to where it was before. Go ahead, Jim.
I always say sometimes that acoustics is a black art, and that literally it is tar.
and it is like, the reason that I thought it would be interesting to talk about is beyond just how to treat your room, is how important that environment is. I've told the story once before, but maybe more than once before. But Ben Burt is a sound designer, a great sound designer. Once talked about how he records gunshots, and he said, "Oh, there's this place in California that has just enough grass to go, and just enough trees to go, shh, and just enough rocks to go." And he goes, "That's where I do all my guns." And of course, I told him, I said, "Where is that?" He goes, "I can't tell you." That was definitely that was a secret, And but the point that what really drew me out into that was how important the environment was to record everything. What we hear is not what the microphone picks up; it's what the environment hands back to the microphone. And it just makes an entirely different flavor based on that. The chants that don't make any that sound one way, that what they learned really quickly is that a lot of the chants that were done in the Middle Ages only sound good in the cathedral that they're in. like they only sound right because they actually timed them and planned them with the reflections of the room, and that's what the chant was doing, was actually cycling. But if you take it to another cathedral or try to record it straight, completely different, doesn't. And so then they had to do impulses of the spaces to figure that out and figure out how to reproduce them. First question. We got a lot of questions now.
We do. Tim McCulloch of Wichita, Kansas is up first with reflection, diffusion, absorption. How do they interact, and how do these perceptions change with the physical environment size? That's what we've been talking about.
Well, I will say that my depth of understanding of acoustics on a mathematical level is not very deep. But I will say that in a lot of it is the most common thing you're going to want to focus on if you're in the context of recording a clean vocal is definitely absorption, because it's the easiest thing to grasp and how it behaves. It's pretty easy to work with. As you're trying to change the way a room sounds and go larger, you can start experimenting a lot more with diffusion. But in terms of perceptions and the physical environment size, that's that's over my head a little bit. Anybody else?
Yeah, Marty?
It depends on the kind of room that you're going to be in. If you're in a large space, first of all, in any space, the most important thing is isolation, is isolating the sound that's in the room from sounds that are outside the room. And once you have a nice quiet room, then you can begin to create the kind of acoustic space that's appropriate for the work that you're doing. If you're recording an orchestra, you want a fairly lively space that has a certain amount of reverberation, but not reflections. So reflections are like an echo. I speak out, sound bounces off of a wall and comes back to me. Reverberation is a whole bunch of reflections, like thousands and thousands of reflections that are really close together and very dense so that you can't hear individual reflections. And you can create that kind of effect with dispersion that reflects sounds in different directions. So you use different tools to create a kind of sonic environment for the work that you're doing. Now, if you're just doing a vocal, like a voiceover, you want a fairly dry environment because room ambience is not important in context to the work you're doing.
Yeah,
but music, on the other hand, can be different.
Yeah, especially because the producer or the mixer engineer or the person on the other end wants to have complete control over what that voice is going to sound like later. If you start out in an environment, it's hard to scrub that environment out later. That's going to change. I mean, machine learning is late to the game in audio, but we're going to figure out how to deal with practically any negative acoustical and noise environment probably in the next 5 or 10 years. Yeah. So all this stuff's going to change, but it is definitely context. Even in voiceover, exactly as Mickey mentioned, there's different context to voiceover, and this is one of the hardest things we're dealing with right now, as everything is being recorded in a closet or in a tiny box in someone's home. And the engineers on the other end are trying to work with all these actors in all these foreign environments and convey to them mic technique or different ways to get the sound that the engineer on the other end who's listening on Source Connect, what they want to hear. And they'll tell the actor to do certain things that in their environment back at their studio would work beautifully. But now that the actor is on a shotgun mic or something in a tiny box, it just doesn't work. They'll say, can you back a few feet away from the mic? And the actor's like, okay, that's as far as I can go. Right, so it's really challenging now for these engineers. How do they get the sound they're accustomed to getting and the performance they're accustomed to getting when the actors are in these little boxes?
Right. Tim?
Well, where I was going with that is that if you follow too many YouTube videos, there's a great emphasis placed on absorption. Very little placed on isolation that's meaningful. If you're getting mechanical issues, sounds from elsewhere in your home, floors that creak, the building rattles, whatever it is, absorption doesn't largely fix that. These are all separate things and they all interact.
Because it's hard.
Because it's hard, absolutely. And I think this is the other thing I'm a big fan of is experimenting. Put on a pair of headphones, get your microphone, move it somewhere relative to that. Or, you may think that what you really need is absorption in front of you, and what you need is some diffusion. You need a curved reflector so you don't get a hard slap coming back at the backside of your mic. But they all interact. And that's kind of why I was hoping you could address that. That's why I use the word perception.
Yeah.
Rather than, let's do the math and figure this out. The math is meaningless when what we're working on is what matters in our ears.
You do have to use your ears, and you only have to worry about this when it comes to acoustics. I'm a huge minimalist. I'm not the wallpaper of the place guy. I'm the listen and place and experiment, because all you really care about is how it sounds right here. It doesn't have to sound good here, or in the other corner of the room. So
it's a lot like miking drums. It's not what it sounds like to the drummer sitting 3 feet above the kit on his throne. It's what it sounds to the microphone you've got an inch off the drum.
drums are super complex because you've got oftentimes many microphones, and you've got them all interacting with each other and phase canceling.
There's all of those factors, but it's the idea that, you know, the microphone hears what the microphone hears because that's where you put it.
Right.
And if you don't like what you're hearing, let's move the microphone or change what the microphone is hearing from those reflections. You know, you spoke to that early, and, you know, reflections come, you talked about an early reflection, you're talking 10, 15, 20, 30 milliseconds maybe. And that's what gives us that perception of space, is that initial delay. On the other hand, there are places where you don't want that, and voiceover would be one of them, where you're going to go back and do a lot of processing to it.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing is, like, I found in the last few years of dealing with all these really weird little spaces, is the sweet spot, as you said, you know, move the mic. The sweet spot that where the mic sounds the best in that little space it changes very dramatically the smaller the space. So we're in a really small box, 3 by 3 by 7, moving the mic a few inches up, down, left, or right changes the way that microphone sounds dramatically, more than buying a different microphone. So really know the mic you already have and the space you're in before you try this mic and this mic and this mic and this mic and this mic, because you're every time you change mics, you're starting over with a new variable. You got to learn what it is, how it sounds in your environment, and you got to train your ears. That's a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, the training people's ears, you know, because a lot of times people just don't hear it. Like, they don't hear what we're hearing, you know, in that. And a lot of times, you know, I'll listen to something later of myself, and I'm like, oh, I wish I was listening to my mic. You know, like I was, you know, for whatever reason, my IFB isn't set up that way or whatever, because I can hear something very minor in what that is. But I think that's part of it, is training people's, we call it eye training as well. Like, ear training and eye training are almost the most important part of the puzzle for anything that we do, because figuring out how to close the gap is easy. Knowing where the gap is can be hard. Mickey.
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned multiple times in the past that, like, what makes the biggest difference in terms of your incoming signal is what is earlier in the chain. So, you know, starting from the speaker, the presenter, like, if their voice is harsh and annoying, it's going to sound bad no matter what you do. And then after that, how that voice interacts with the environment makes a bigger difference compared to the microphone itself, because it's earlier in the chain.
And it's why when we send out kits to people, a lot of times we send out headsets. They have their own little problems, you know, the little wire, you know, whether it's a cheap Pyle or a Countryman or whatever, because we close the gap between the source and the pickup. We do that because we don't get to treat their room. Like, I don't get to treat their room. I don't get to, you know, they don't know what they're listening to. They don't know how to make that work. And so I'm just going to solve that by sending them a headset. And it's inexpensive. It's the inexpensive Pyle or Pulson. At $10 or $15, I can't buy another mic that will give them the same audio quality, you know, in that price range. And so it's at that price point, under $50, it's the best solution. And I don't have to train them, and I don't have to do anything else, and it just works. But
does this have an XLR jack in, Alex? How do they connect?
So I think Jason's using one right now. Jason, do you have that? Is that the Pyle?
The one I'm wearing right now is the Pulson audio,
which I think sounds actually better than the Pyle. But that's,
can you put the model number in the chat?
Yeah,
I'd love to.
Like,
no, I'm serious. You know, this is like a never-ending search for a headset mic that sounds good. It isn't $700.
Exactly. We have the Pulson we found to be, I mean, pretty much it's under $100 and maybe under $150. I go, well, we'll just get a Pulson, because it's 1/8-inch jack, and then we use a USB, you know, into it. But the whole package is like $30, and but we do it specifically because I can't treat someone's room. I need them to sound okay for this event. I need them to look good. They don't necessarily want to have a mic in front of them. You know, they're not, because putting a mic in front of them means that I have to train them on how to do that. You know, whereas just put this headset on. There's a little bit of work to get the headset in the right place, but then you're
the
done.
TED Talk mic. And I just call people, just think of the TED Talk mic.
Exactly. No, it's great.
It works for a reason.
Let's jump to the next question. We got questions stacking up.
We do. Ruben Marchena of Grand Rapids, Michigan's up next. With the church I'm a member of, has a brick wall on the back and is as wide and tall as the building with double doors and side windows. I've been thinking on placing drapes on it. Would it be better to place panels or drapes?
I would
diagnosis from 1,000 miles away.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm always thinking practical. Panels are, going to be kind of a fixed thing. You put them up and hope for the best. And drapes are something that you can adjust. You can open and close and vary their placement very quickly and easily. You can make them match the decor and make it work in your space. So drapes, theater drapes, you want really, really heavy stuff. Like that theater velour stuff is awesome.
Rose brand.
Yeah.
Rose
what is
brand
it?
for
Rose
the win.
brand for the win. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, that's why I think I would go that route instead of panels. Panels is a little bit harder to deal.
And one of the things that I think about when I do drapes, when I'm using them acoustically, is the fullness. 100% fullness means is basically you're using half the distance of the drapes, right? So
the pleating, is that the
the pleating, yeah.
Oh,
So when you say I want to cover 30 feet with 100% fullness, it's really pleating. And it's not pleating, but you're pulling the drapes together, right? So it's not the sewn pleating, but it's pulling the drapes together so that they have a lot of depth to them. And obviously that makes it, like, rather than pulling it straight across, when you pull that fullness in, it does a lot of diffusion and some absorption as well. Go ahead, Michael.
Something else to consider also is where you're aiming the speakers, the PA. Don't aim that thing any higher than 6 feet. If you have people listening all the way at that back wall, then don't aim any higher than 6 feet on that back wall. And if you can tilt them down to where you're not hitting that back wall at all, even better. And there are several companies. Rose Brand is a great company, but there are several companies out there that make curtains relatively cost effective. With fullness and all that kind of stuff. There's one here in Texas. There's one in Florida. Rose Brand's out of New York. They're all over. So do a little bit of research. The curtains is probably the most effective option because you can move it, because you can take it up and down easily. Blah blah blah.
I've had I walked into one studio and it sounded really good. I don't know that, but they had sound blankets at 100% fullness. Then in front of it they had like a 6-inch air gap, and then they had velour curtains at 100% fullness, and it was like it wasn't as good as isolating the room, but it was amazing. Like they both went all the way to the ground, and they created, so they have a 6-inch gap with a lot of stuff to it, and it just really annihilated a lot of the sound that would otherwise go in. Let's jump to the next question.
Roscoe Jones asks, what role does the human body play in blocking reflections to the microphone?
Definitely has a role. I worked with an actor who's a lady of size, and in a lot of, she'll have a open top, there's skin, there's a surface area. And no matter what I do with the microphone, I swear I'm getting reflection. An early reflection off of her body, and I can't, and it's just part of her sound. I maybe you could EQ it out a little bit to try to correct for it, but it's just there. So it's going to vary from person to person size, but there's something to it, and aiming the microphone to correct for that can also be a good idea. Like you'll see, I'm using this microphone, this shotgun mic, in this up pointing down because I find it's the most flattering sounding in a lot of cases because it's pointing towards my neck and my chest, so it's getting that chest resonance.
Right.
So you're not just miking the hole in your face, you're miking the whole face and the whole body when you mic a voice.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey, and then Roscoe.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think Tim and Michael Fraley would be able to talk about how a stadium sounds so different when there's during mic checks, when there's no people, and during the show when it's full of people.
Yeah.
And also in terms of blocking sound waves in general, like when we do man on the street kind of hits, we oftentimes use the subject, the person, as a shield to block road noise. So they'd have their back against the road and put the microphone in front of them, and they really help out in terms of cleaning it up a bit.
We have some politicians that won't wear an IFB because it looks like they're getting answers, right? Fed into their ears. So they will not wear an IFB. So we have a lav on their front, and we put the speaker right behind them on the back, so they can hear the other side on a point-to-point. But we're literally, to your point, we're using the body as a block from the speaker to the microphone. Roscoe.
Yeah, so if I can rotate the person who's speaking into the microphone, do I want the least reflective wall, assuming a cardioid pickup pattern, do I want the least reflective wall in front of them or the least reflective wall to the sides?
Yeah, I think, you want to think about what's the closest hard, flat object to the microphone and worry about that first. So if you're facing a wall and you're closest to that wall, you definitely want to kill off that reflection, because cardioid mics still pick up a tremendous amount of sound from the sides and back. So I start there. But in some cases, I found that if you have control over which way somebody's facing, spin them around. So if they're starting with I like to call it a dead corner studio, which is very practical. Just take a corner of a room and then treat the heck out of it. I find often it sounds better and gets rid of more room ambient or reflection if you turn the mic around. So now the mic's facing into the dead corner. The voice is pointing out into the room. And so, yes, you're getting some of the room bounce, but the back of the mic's picking up less of it. And just flipping around on its head that way, it sometimes works out really well. Not always, but if the room is full of junk, it's very cluttered, it can actually work out really, really nicely.
Thank you.
Yeah, specific to Roscoe's question, I'll repeat what we mentioned earlier, like use your ears, test it out.
Yep.
It's a black art, as George mentioned.
And I use headphones almost exclusively. The irony, it's kind of like the mechanic who works on Porsches and drives a beat up Volkswagen. I don't have a beautiful control room in a studio to work in that I can trust with. I love my Mackie monitors here, but I can't trust them. And I've been using the same Biodynamic DT770s, second pair, but I've had them for 20 years. So my ears know these and they isolate really, really well. So I'm looking at the Lux meter. Sorry, a little hot. But they isolate really well, and they give me this controlled monitoring environment that goes with me everywhere I go. And I'm not mixing records. There's a lot of arguments why you wouldn't mix a music production just in headphones, but they're working on ways to fix that problem. But if you're just trying to isolate a microphone and hear what it's doing and how it interacts with the room, you really do have to use headphones, I think, for that.
Next question.
John Merrill, Phoenix, Arizona, says, what about flooring and ceiling?
Yeah, well, it's context, right? Music studios almost always have a hardwood floor with an area rug to control the early reflections underneath the microphone, and then they like the liveliness of the room. I think a big overlooked area is the ceiling. In home residential voiceover studios, some of my coolest and nicest sounding rooms were where we focused probably 80% of the treatment on the ceiling. And that was really nice for the actor because we could then allow the room to be more flexible, not feel so much like a studio, have more room for tchotchkes and posters. And and one of my clients, Scott Rummel, who does tons of movies and trailers and commercials, we put everything on the ceiling and then just 2 panels flanking his computer monitor right in the front to get rid of that first reflection off that front wall. And in the context of what he does, it worked fine. It may not work for everybody, but Scott's not doing screaming video games. He's doing Starts Friday, stuff like that all day. So a lot of it has to do with the intensity, the volume of the voice, as to how much you really have to get rid of that energy. It's energy. The louder the source, the more energy, the more it's going to travel. So it's all relative. And I even hear in my own room, which is super minimally treated, that when I get a little excited, I hear my voice start bouncing off the ceiling and bouncing around the room as my energy level goes up. And compressors exaggerate it, but then the gate tries to control it. I got a lot of processing going on here to try to get rid of my room.
Next question.
Eddie Martinez in Sacramento says, how does the ceiling affect reflections? What would you do for a ceiling and when and why?
Well,
that's extension of the first one.
Yeah. He had some premonition on that. Yeah, the ceiling, it's just a good practical place to put a lot of treatment because you're not staring at it all day and it's not usable space. So you kill off that ceiling reflection area, and that does a tremendous amount because what it's doing is the sound, some of the sound does make a straight line ping pong. It goes straight up and then travels straight back at the mic. And so that is what you want to kill off. That's the worst early reflection. But then from there, the rest of the sound's going off at all these different random oblique angles. So a lot of it is going up and eventually hitting the ceiling. So if you make that ceiling as dead as possible, you're going to get a ton of this other random bounce that's coming off the walls, and then the ceiling's going to take care of it for you. So how I would treat it is I would, the thicker and denser, the thicker the panel, the better. Go with 4 to 6 inches of acoustical treatment on your ceiling. We like making clouds. You can frame out your whole ceiling and fill that thing with insulation and then make a nice fabric scrim over it. You can put lighting boxes in there so it has can lighting. We've even had to duct HVAC systems right through the middle of it. But whatever you got to do just to kill off all that ceiling reflection, it's really effective.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just to build on what George was saying regarding, reflections, you want to, as much as possible, if you're going for a really dead sound, to get rid of as many parallel surfaces as you can. That way your reflection doesn't bounce back at exactly the same direction and give you standing waves.
Next question.
Eddie Martinez is back again with the third one. You sound great. Can you please describe your room, or maybe what you had to do when you got into that small space to make it work better for you, George?
Well, I mean, I practice what I preach. So I experimented. I put things up. I took things down, but I didn't overdo it. And then because what I'm doing here is in this room is presenting. I'm doing what we're doing now. I'm doing a talk show on the internet. I'm doing webinars. I can get away with a little bit higher noise floor. Speaking of noise floor, cue the leaf blower. Perfect timing. Man, is it noisy here sometimes. I can get away with a lot because I can get away with quite a lot of processing because I'm the broadcaster. I can control what I use for processing. I can use a tremendous amount of noise gating as I'm using right now to make this tolerable. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm using a big blackout drape on my windows on this side. You can see it in the corner of the frame. I have an acoustical panel just off camera over here to the left. I've got massive computer monitors in front of me, which is usually a no-no, but it seems to be working out okay because I'm using a super directional shotgun mic, so it's not picking up as much of the reflection. I have on my right just regular closets full of clothing, but I have one set of the sliders wide open. So that's now another absorbing function in the room. There's a small futon bed right below me. That's my daughter's space when she's here. That's a certain big part of the acoustical control. And then there's a huge amount of clutter on these shelves back here, my equipment museum. All of that is part of the acoustical signature of this room. It's unique to this room. Yours won't be the same, but that's what I'm doing.
That's great. Next question.
Greg Yotes in Gridley, Kansas says, typically, what is the most important, walls, floors, or ceiling to get quality sound, and absorption or diffusion?
Yeah, the diffusion absorption thing is so specific to what you're trying to achieve, your goals, as we talked about. And just based on what I was just saying, I like ceilings. I've kind of overlooked them myself over the years, but some of my favorite rooms that sound the best were because we focused a lot of absorption on the ceiling. And that's the problem with these questions. You really have to know the context.
I'm in a box. Like I started this during the beginning of COVID, and I ended up with a box I just built a box and then just put moving blankets for me, just all back front. There's only one open is right on the other side of this, and it's actually got a couple that are a little further away. But and still, it's not a great room. Like it's great because I have a mic that does. I'm really close to a mic. A broadcast mic that has a lot of high off-axis rejection.
Yeah, exactly. Building a box is cheap. You can get PVC pipe and make something that you can drape stuff on very, very, very rapidly and cheaply.
Mine was piping. Just I went and got plumbing.
Actual plumbing pipe. Yeah.
Actually, plumbing plug. It was about $150, and I had and I built a grid so I can hang things.
Yeah,
from
it's
it and
more
everything else.
strong. You can hang stuff from it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm on my way to something else. I just haven't gotten there yet. Next question.
Next, we're going to ask George what the best spice is, salt or pepper. Just goofing with you. James in Dublin, Ireland says, with a typical low-cost office hours setup with a Pyle $15 mic, how much of a difference would acoustic paneling make?
It'll still help a lot to get rid of some of that liveliness in a room. If I took this 8x10 bedroom here and took everything out and I still had a headset mic, it would still be pretty darn echoey and reflective in here. So you want to have at least some practical treatment. We think of practical lighting for video. I think of practical acoustical treatment for rooms. Just as many objects as you can put in there practically, club chairs and furniture and objects to just break up the reflections is really, really helpful.
Next question.
So minimalist decor, not good.
No, not when you're trying to get a dry, direct, high intelligibility sound.
Finally, all my tendency towards clutter pays off. That's all I'm saying. It's just, all right. Next question.
The Marie Kondo School of Acoustics.
There you go. Ooh. Charles Klein in New York City is in with for room monitoring, not mastering surround sound. What treatment do you suggest that, if needed, can be moved to another studio in the future?
I don't have a lot of experience tuning rooms for that context. If anybody on the panel does, feel free to speak up. But a lot of the acoustical panels that I use are just glorified, they're just wood frames. You can hang them very effectively without a lot of damage. You can take them down. Think of it as hanging 25 or 30 paintings in your room, essentially. That's a good way to start, but certainly tuning a room for monitoring, for mixing that is definitely an art. And anybody in this panel, I don't know who.
I had a friend that had a room that he was recording in, and he, you can get prints done on
yes.
And he had all these, he had these boxes that were like 4 inches thick, and he put something, I don't know what he put in the center, but then on the front he had sent out, and they were like 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, and he had these gorgeous pictures and designs all printed on the front. And when you walked in, you were like, wow, where did you get those? And those are just his sound, and it cost him very little to have it done. It was really interesting. Go ahead, Greg.
I put in a small room one time in Burbank, and the guy who was running the room was a mixer, an older guy, and he had all these panels from the wall of the original Decca studios. And so it was all this tie-dyed stuff and paisley, and it was but it was exactly the same thing. I don't know if it was the Owings Corning or it was rockwool, but they were just panels with a wood frame and some cloth covering, and they were just attached. I mean, they were hung from the wall, so there's maybe this much airspace between the wall and the panel. So they're completely movable.
Mm-hmm. You get a lot more bang for the buck if you have a 2-inch panel and you have a 2-inch air gap. It performs more like a 4-inch panel.
Right. Mickey and then Michael.
Yeah, you guys probably seen the shots of my studio when I'm there. Essentially, I have we made wooden frames, filled them with rockwool, and cover them up with fabric. They're of various sizes, and most of them are wedge shaped, and we hang them on the walls using industrial strength Velcro. And the studio that I'm in now, that I use now, that's the third studio that those panels have been in. So they last a long time. And in terms of how to treat them, I typically treat the room. I typically start by hitting the first 2 walls the sound hits from each speaker. So like say my front left speaker, the first wall it typically hits would be towards my rear right. So I would put a panel there and then figure out where the second wall, where it would hit the second time, and put another panel there. And that with all the speakers in the 7-1 or whatever, how many speakers you're using, would be my starting off point. Then I would walk around the room while I'm playing back content and have a listen and see where I hear more anomalies. And then we start to get into measuring RT60, which is essentially how long it takes for the sound for the reverb or delays to diminish by 60 dB. And I forget I don't have off the top of my head how many milliseconds you want that to be, but you just try to tune the room to bring that down to spec.
Yeah, it's context again. One of my favorite suppliers, I'll say their name just because I love them very much. ATS Acoustics. They've got great information on their site, and they have some very simple calculators on there where you can put in your room dimensions, and then it shows this huge grid of RT60 times, and it even asks you the context. So for a conference room, it might be 1 second or a half a second, and for a voiceover booth, you want it to be like 0.2 seconds or less to have a really dry sound. And a cathedral on the other end of the equation, a cathedral is 10 seconds or more. You make an impulse, snap your fingers. How long does it take for that sound to diminish by 60 dB? 10 seconds or more in a really huge cathedral. So the RT60 time is an interesting one.
When I walk in, I think I talked about this before, when I walk into a room that is like that we have to do an event in, you'll just hear me I'll be sitting there, I'll go. It's just easy. The clapping is a little too much, but it sounds like I have a nervous tick. but I'm just going, and I can tell you exactly what that room's going to sound like from a couple clicks.
Not to go tangent here. There's more questions, but there's a blind fellow who can ride a bicycle by doing that.
Oh, really?
Look it up.
Right.
No joke.
Yeah, exactly. Michael.
So Mickey kind of addressed part of what I was going to say, but the other thing is too, if you have a tall room, a high ceiling, hanging shorter drapery, 2 to 4 foot at intervals along in there helps trap and kill that stuff that builds up top there that the microphone's going to pick up and bounce down and reflect on. So, even if it's banners, if you're doing an event and you need to put up a banner or something, but that I've used that a number of times now, and it is just super effective at soaking that stuff up.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, to expand on what Michael just said, if I can't get absorption, I'll take the diffusion. So if you can break up those standing waves that are up there near the ceiling, that takes an incredible amount of boom out of a larger room, and it will tighten up a smaller room as well if you've got the overhead clearance for it. It doesn't think absorption or diffusion doesn't have to be flat against the surface you're mounting it to. Think 3D.
Next question.
Next question comes from Greg Yotes of Gridley, Kansas. For informational video voiceover, how do you get that really rich sound, in-room or audio processing?
It starts with the instrument, right?
Yeah. And then the microphone.
Yeah, from the instrument to the microphone to the room acoustics to the signal chain. I'm a big believer in less is more. I know we're a super technical bunch and we love having lots of cool gear, but for 95% of the situations where a voiceover is recording themselves from home, start super simple with a low self-noise mic. Rode makes a lot of, they're known for their low noise microphones at a good price range. There's so many others though. And then an interface, just a simple Scarlett made by Focusrite for $150. They are so good at getting clean recorded audio from a condenser mic. Just start there, and believe it or not, some of the best voices you'll ever hear were recorded with something not unlike that. The rest is just very tasteful amounts of compression, EQ, and when I do a lot of processing for people. One of the things they do is hire me to just make a preset to get that sound. And I always tell them, another analogy is like, if it's like bad makeup, it when you see it. So I try to do acoustics I try to do processing that nobody ever notices.
Right. Yeah.
That's the idea. Like nobody should ever go, whoa, listen to that processing. Then I did it wrong. It's overbaked.
Go ahead, Bill, and then Mickey, real quick. We're running out of time.
So sometimes you want to impress people. And if you want that big sound, it's really tempting to just over compress and over excite and try to make it big. anybody who I'm working with, usually the best thing I love to hear is, okay, well, give me an idea what you think it just sound like, but send it to me dry as well, because that dry sound is going to get to somebody like Mickey, who in the context of the bed they're putting it in and everything else will make it sound exactly right. And if I try to do that stuff in advance before I send them the file, they can't get what I've done out to put in what it really needs.
Right. Mickey?
Yeah, like as I mentioned earlier, like the earlier in the chain, the bigger the difference. So it starts with the voice. Like a nice, rich voice will get you a good recording, no matter, like, you know, as George mentioned, like a cheap Focusrite interface will get that done. And if like someone like Bill or say maybe Tim just goes up close to the mic, like VO style, then you'll get that nice sound.
Yeah, the proximity effect.
Yeah. Next
We've
question.
been working that for decades.
Yeah. Next question.
Chris Comfort in New York says, when consulting with voice actors, do you ever advise based on time of day, day of week, when trying to find the least noisy moments in their building or neighborhood?
Yeah, of course. I mean, because soundproofing is expensive, time shifting is cheaper. So, especially folks in the city, you try to find the quietest time. And God help you, if you're an audiobook narrator, it is the hardest thing to do because you need hours and hours of quiet. The voice is completely isolated, right? There's no music or effects in most audiobooks. It's just dry voice. And it is so hard to find that. And it's probably the lowest paying for many people when they get started. So they put a lot of time and effort into not making any money, but hey, you know, it's a way to get into it. And some people really like reading. So find a time when you can record uninterrupted. And if we're really evaluating for a design of a studio, I'll have people send me room tone and voice samples at different intervals of the day. That's a good question, and we definitely take that into account.
Yeah, one of the things that I've done in the past is leave a mic in a room that I'm going to work in, and I leave it there for a couple days, and then I just look at the waveform.
Just look at it, zoomed way out, and look at the bumps.
If I see little bumps, okay, what was that? Oh, the trash comes on Tuesday at 8 a.m.
See, that's why I'm here. This is gold right here. This is gold.
Exactly. Next question.
Jason,
and I think,
thanks.
Jason, you have two kind of related right next to each other. So you have, let's jump to the second one, which is that you have the question is really cost-effective absorption, but you have something that you use right now?
Yeah, I do actually. I have something I built a couple of years ago. I'll just show on screen.
Hey.
Yeah, so the top right is just a simple wood frame, just some leftover bits and pieces of plywood I had. The bottom right is when I put 4-inch rockwool in there, covered it with just some cheap black material in the back, burlap on top, picture frame hangers, and then hung it on the wall like you see on the left.
That looks like Rockboard 60, I think they call that.
I believe so.
Pretty
4-inch.
rigid.
Yeah, 2 foot by 4 foot panels and 1 foot by 4 foot panels, about 35 each.
And you're happy with it?
It's cheap to do. The hardest part is the
really
upholstery.
good.
The upholstery, making it look good, is the hardest thing, I think, for many people.
Yeah. Stuart?
The entire walls of the Coventry Street studio in South Melbourne is covered with boxes like that. And it is on one side of the studio complex. The studio is 5 stories high, not including the pool. Yeah, it's all like that. And it is amazingly quiet inside those spaces.
I was amazed. I walked into a soundstage at Sony, and they just had, I think, probably 8 layers of moving blankets just bolted into the walls. Like the whole thing is just. Let's take a bunch of moving blankets. There's
That's what
thousands
you see.
and thousands. Yeah,
These white, thick cotton blankets just riveted to the walls with chicken wire. You know, they're not very sexy.
Yeah. I like it, but we handled it. Chris?
Yeah, I cut a piece years ago where the client had flown people in from all over the country to a hotel right next to SFO. And they sounded great. I said, how did you do this? He goes, I got a giant grip truck and I built 4 layers of tents out of blankets and C-stands and speed rail, kind of like your tent that you have at your house, Alex.
Right.
He goes, 4 separate layers. And I said, even though it was literally right, it was one of the typical like airport hotels. Sounded great.
Yeah. That's great. Next, it works. It works. I mean, just once you kind of know what you're doing, you can solve layers. You got enough layers of anything, you can make it work.
Turducken booth.
Yeah. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather, Melbourne, Australia is up next. What would be the basic pointers for building a space to record voices for animated films? And would that be the same for games? No, the space will need 1 to 5 actors working in it.
Yeah, well, as we've talked about a lot, the isolation is going to be your biggest enemy. The more microphones you have open in one space, the more noise sensing devices you have. So it has to be very quiet. That's a challenge. It's amazing how many studios are near Burbank or in Burbank. I have a client right now designing one in a garage, and it's extremely difficult to get the sound of the airplanes out. And then you want to have as high a ceiling as you can, because low ceilings are the enemy when it comes to getting great natural open recorded sound. So hopefully you have at least an 8-foot or much higher is really preferable ceiling. And I think for animated and games, I'm not aware of a dramatic difference. I know there are certainly game voice recording technique that's specialized now, where they'll use a lavalier mic on a held in place with a beanie. That's being used quite a lot nowadays because they want the actor to have full, absolute, complete flexibility. And in a lot of cases now, mocap is part of it. So the actor is being mocapped at the same time. So how it's mic'd is going to be part of it as well. But animated films more traditionally would use a large diaphragm mic and maybe a shotgun mic in addition. They often use 2 mics at 2 different gain settings to allow for some safety when the actor loses their mind on a line. So there are some subtle differences, but if you made it to sound good for an animated film, you could make it work for the games as well, I think. So it wouldn't be so specialized, but some folks here may know more than that.
Go ahead, Mickey, and then Stuart, and then Chris. Real quick, we're running out of time.
Yeah, really good point about mocap. A lot of people go for the miniature shotguns from DPAs mounted on a band. But in terms of recording multiple actors at the time for animated films and also for games, you want to be able to have enough space to be flexible in terms of their placement in the room, because depending on the director and also the actors and actresses, some of them want to be spaced apart and everyone looking at the monitor or a projection screen, but some of them want to be placed in a circle and all the actors are looking at each other. So you want to be able to have that flexibility, enough space to do that. And with having to double mic them, and with the second mic typically being 2 or 3 feet away, that's you need space for the stands and everyone.
Go ahead, Stuart, and then Chris. And then we're going to move on.
Yeah, it's just to the point where the microphones are all open. Actors like to work off each other, and I know that creates a lot of problems when it comes to sound recordings.
Go ahead, Chris.
Something George said earlier about he can get away with a lot of stuff at a certain volume, but as soon as he goes above that volume, all the rules change. And I would imagine definitely for games and possibly for animated films also, you're going to get some yelling in there. So prepare for that loudest stuff.
Next question.
Mark Harder, Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Best answer to A, dissipating computer noise, and B, computer monitor reflection, and then C, resonance from music stands. And are you a fan of people using tablets, iPads for people to read scripts from? Note paper restful and how to mount paper to read from.
It's the turducken of questions. Very nice. Let's start number 1. Dissipating computer noise. Move the computer. Buy another one. I bought a Mac Mini M1. I know I'm Mac geeking out here, but my hand is on it. You will never ever hear it. It is unbelievably quiet and cheap. $1,000 for a silent powerhouse of a computer is very, very compelling. Computer monitor reflection. Avoid the bank shot. Think of a pool game. You're shooting the ball, and you think of that angle. As long as you angle your monitors so that the sound that reflects from them is somewhat directed away from your microphone, even subtly, can be enough. You maybe only have to tilt them back an inch, tilt it back this way or down an inch, or play around with the angles of your screens. It might be enough to get rid of that early phasey reflection sound. Resonance from music stands. Put a heavy hand towel over it. Get rid of the metallic reflection, as well as aiming it correctly as well. Don't put it like directly behind a microphone so that you have the copy reflecting and back into the mic, have it down at a bit of an angle. And then I am a huge fan of using iPads for reading scripts because you can constantly change the script. You can do page turns silently. Now with an Apple Pencil, you can have the actors do quick corrections. Very, very big fan. But even if you don't have the budget, just get a little iPad mini for $50 on eBay, and they're the greatest script reading tools out there.
Mickey, real quick.
Yeah, on music stands, a piece of carpet tile works really well.
Carpet scraps, yeah.
Yeah, and also in terms of, if the actor wants to work with paper scripts, format it in a way so that you don't have any lines that cross pages. Always like that. So they don't have to do a page turn midline.
Right. Next question.
Greg Yotes of Gridley, Kansas says, to control audio signal noise grounds particularly, does USB or portable devices solve the problem easiest?
It depends. Not really. I mean, my biggest noise issues happen when I have more than one audio interface on a system. I'm always using these Apollo Twin and Universal Audio Apollo interfaces, but then I'm trying to use another utility interface for different purposes because things don't always share and audio routing doesn't go where you want it to. So I get a lot of issues where I've got multiple devices, each on USB, but all connected via audio signal. And I do get a noise through those kind of interactions quite a lot. So USB doesn't solve the problem for sure.
Yeah, go ahead. Tim?
Yeah, to expand on that just a little, it depends on where the noise is coming from first. If it's coming from your mic or it's at the preamp or it's because you've got a cable with a bad shield, nothing fix it. Well, you can fix it later in post, but you're not going to fix it in real time without throwing some serious processing at it. If you actually have genuine ground loop issues, you either have bad cables or you have an electrical problem or you have a device with what we call the pin 1 problem, and you should fix those problems and they will go away forever.
Right. Next question.
And it's our last one in the day, and it's Hasmuk, our friend from Cape Town, South Africa. I'm now using a 416 shotgun as my office hours mic. It sits on the desk on a stand. Can't point it to my chest. Mickey gave some advice for walls and floors. What about my wooden desktop on which the mic rests? Is that an issue? And in front of my mic is a 32-inch monitor. What about the monitor? How do I fix that?
A really cheap, fast, easy fix is really to cover your desk with a nice, big, thick, heavy terry cloth towel or something and get rid of that early reflection. And, think about your desk is probably the biggest hard reflective thing that's parallel to the ceiling. So if you're not going to work with the ceiling, start with the desk. Get rid of that big reflective area. Even if it's temporary, it may not be practical or attractive, but if you just want to pull off the best sound you can, I could have done that today, actually, would probably would have been helpful. But that's a good way to go. The monitor, again, is all about angles. If it's not too close, you can angle the monitor and reduce that reflection.
Mickey?
Yeah, a large mouse pad, like a mouse pad that covers the entire desk would help.
A mouse pad blotter kind of looking thing.
Cut up an old wetsuit.
An old wetsuit, yeah.
They're hard to find, but giant neoprene mouse pads are awesome.
I like to cover my my desk with lots of junk. I have lots of electronics all hanging out. For some reason I have a motor. But I have lots of things laying around, and it seems to do a pretty good
job.
This
is from my dad. I have one of these. Why do I have this? I don't know, but it's a paperweight full of old electronics from the 60s, from his ham radio days, molded in a piece of acrylic. You got to
exactly. That's a little diffusion there. Hey George, thanks for joining us. It was
man, I gotta say, you guys, this is an honor. Really,
great
Alex,
to have
I'm
you
a
here.
fan from you from way back, of course, from Twit days, and I don't know how often I can be here with you guys. You're a dedicated group, but man, I'm
come
happy
Tuesdays.
to come back.
Tuesdays are our audio
pop
days.
in anytime.
Yeah, but
Awesome.
pop in anytime. Tuesdays it's the second day. We might try to get. I want to talk about isolation in the future. So
It definitely is a whole topic. Yeah, for
so
sure.
We'll talk about that next. Maybe even next week. So
Awesome.
but sometime soon. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, George, and thanks to everyone. Again, I've talked about this before. The education and the audio days are the days where we really get this think tank of folks, that come in and are able to share a lot of wisdom. So really appreciate everybody who makes the time to come out and hang out with us on Tuesdays. So thank you all for coming in, and thanks to the audience. As always, great questions. A little cajoling on my end, but great questions.
We got through all of them. That was the amazing thing.
We have a policy of no question left behind. So we work pretty fast. You'll notice that we're a little slow at the beginning. We talk a little bit, and then
we start
the velocity. Yeah, if you watch me, you'll watch me looking like this and looking down like this and looking up like this. And what I'm doing is the math of like how many minutes per question do I have. So
you're a pro.
It's constantly working it. All right, hey everybody, if you want to jump into the post show, we're doing that next. And otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow. And remember that tomorrow night is Clubhouse at 7:00. But tomorrow morning is the normal process. And if you're looking for the link for the post show, it's in the registration link that you got, or the reminder link that you got. It's down at the bottom. It's hidden there. It's kind of the secret door. All right. See you guys.